Mr.
Hey,
Jones and then
it's
refused to believe
Geronimo.
anything that he
I
told
want
them.
to tell you the
If the
truth about
deputies had taken
something.
the time to conduct an
When I
actual
was
investigation into the
17,
complainant's claims, or made
I'm going to
any
say
effort
back
to
in
verify the information that
76,
Mr. Jones
77,
provided
somewhere in
outside
there,
of forcing him to identify
I got
himself, then
arrested
this
for a crime I
interaction could
didn't
have had a
commit.
peaceful and
The crime
positive
was committed
resolution.
against my
In an effort to
father, and it
curtail
was
the
done
duty
by
of acting as an
two
impartial
friends that I'd actually
investigator in a
went to
criminal
school with,
claims, the
who
deputies
grew up to be
misrepresented the facts of the
the
encounter,
kind of
made
guys that like to
blatantly
break into
false
people's
claims,
homes
and
and steal their
distorted the
shit.
language of Arkansas law in
They
their
broke into my
favor. At
dad's
one point in
home,
the
and they
video,
stole all
Sergeant
his
McMillan
guns.
tells the jailer to be sure to book Mr.
I had
Jones
just
so that
come
it
in from
appears
Texas
less
the
like the
day
trooper
before
had made
this
a mistake,
happened. Or
and it
I
appears as
guess,
though the sergeant was questioning
yeah,
the
I'm going to say the
legality
day
of his
before it
own
happened.
conduct. Ultimately, the
And I was going
deputy's
to go see
decision
my
to arrest
father and
Mr.
say
Jones
hello.
was lazy and
And
unprofessional,
I
and this
literally walked
interaction highlights
around
the
the old
important
house that I
role that
grew up in.
investigation plays in law enforcement. Mr.
I
Jones,
went to
it's a
work at a golf course
B-minus, because
washing
although he could have
dishes,
invoked his right to silence order
minimum
effectively,
wage,
he remained calm
just
and
to make
collected
a
throughout the
dollar.
encounter, challenged the conduct
I'm
of the deputies without
17 years
becoming
old. I
rude or
lived on my
volatile, and
own
maintained a
since I was
respectable balance
12
between complying with the lawful commands of the
because of what
deputies
my
and
father
invoking
did to me.
his constitutional rights.
But
Mr.
either
Jones
way,
offered the
I
officers
came to just
all the
say hello to
information
him,
that
and I
they
walked
needed to
around his
verify
house.
whether or not
I
he was
had on a pair of
trespassing,
cowboy
and it is
boots,
difficult to
and
fault
one of
Mr.
the
Jones
heels
for
was missing off
refusing
that
to
cowboy
surrender
boot, and it
information that he
left a
was not
hollow
legally
hole.
obligated to share. It was not
So
Mr.
that in
Jones's job to
Florida, it's all
investigate
sand.
whether or not he was
Wherever you
trespassing,
walk, you
and he
leave a
made a
footprint.
legitimate effort to dispel the
Well, that
deputy's
boot print was
suspicions
as
without
obvious as
compromising his own
a pimple
personal
on your
privacy.
nose.
All
I
that
ain't
said,
denying
the
not
fact that
one
Mr. Jones
time
did
that I
not
didn't
attend
go
his court
visit my
hearings
dad,
may
because
have
I
a
did.
significant impact on the outcome of
Well, it
this
just so
case, and
happens
it goes without saying
the
that
day
it
that
is
I went over there,
extremely
which
important
was
to be
in broad
present at
daylight,
any court
probably
summons
2
so that
o'clock in
you
the
can ensure
afternoon,
that
my
your
dad
case is
wasn't
being
home.
properly handled.
I
If
left,
nothing
and like I
else,
said, I
I
went to go
commend
to
Mr.
work on a
Jones for
golf course
keeping a level
washing
head
dishes.
throughout the encounter and for
The
insisting that
next
his rights
day,
be respected.
my dad
However,
shows up
I would
at my
also
job
encourage Mr. Jones to
and tells
channel his
me,
passion into
without
defending his
any
actions in the
uncertain
courtroom instead.
terms,
Let
I've
us know if
got
there's an
24
interaction you'd like
hours
to
to get
copy that
his
you would like
guns
us to
back,
discuss in the comments
or I'm
below.
going to
Thank you for
jail.
watching, and don't forget to check out my second channel for even more
One, I'm
police
like,
interaction
what are you
content.
talking about, Dad? I'm sorry, I'm confused. What the hell are you talking about? He says, let me see your boot. Now, when you're a kid, 17 years old, you don't think anything about this shit. But either way, I pick up my boot and I showed it to him. He says, I'm telling you, you got 24 hours to get my guns back or you're going to jail. Well, I didn't commit the crime. Yes, my boot print was on his property. I did go to see my dad. I'll admit it 1,000 times over. But I did not break into his house and steal his guns. But that particular night, them two boys decided, because when you're kids, man, this is what I don't understand. See, I couldn't convince my dad of this. When you're kids, you brag about your fathers. You know, my dad was a Marine, my dad was in the Air Force, my dad was this, my dad was that, my dad's better than your dad, my dad has got this, my dad has got that. Okay, so I grew up with a family that liked to hunt, so my dad had a lot of guns. So that's what I bragged about. My dad had cool ass guns, old guns, good guns, new guns, any kind of gun. You know, he liked guns. I love guns. But they decided, for whatever reason, God knows, I hadn't been to that house in, Jesus, 2 years. And the one day I decided to walk around that son of a bitch to visit my father. And God, I wish he'd have been home, because then, see, I could have visited him. We'd have done that walk around together. It wouldn't have been an issue. Then when his house got broken into, my name would have never been brought up. But my boot print got me 24 hours or go to jail. Now, my father left as soon as he said that to me. Okay, now this is like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 4 o'clock maybe. I got 24 hours to retrieve something. I have no clue where to even start looking. So I go to my boss and I tell my boss, I said, listen, there's an emergency come up and I need to leave, and I pray that I get to see you tomorrow.
After Mr. Disorderly exits his vehicle,
you know, nobody ever went to that man and asked him what I said to him when I left that job or anything. And I told that man, I said, dude, I'm being accused of something I didn't do, and I've got 24 hours to try and prove my innocence or they're going to lock me up.
exceptions to the Fourth Amendment
And
warrant
that's all I
requirement that
got.
allows
I said, so
officers
I'm
to
asking you not to
warrant a
fire
search of a
me,
vehicle when
and I need to
consent
go see
stated
if
by
I
its
can't
owner, when there is
figure
probable
out what
cause to
happened,
believe there is
and
evidence
see
of
what
a
I can do.
crime in the vehicle, when a protective
Now,
search is
I didn't
necessary
have a
for the
car.
officer's own safety, and when the
I
suspect
had
is
a
arrested and the
bicycle,
search is conducted
a
pursuant to the
10-speed
arrest. Over
bicycle.
the years, courts have resolved hundreds of
So my
fact-specific
boss
cases
lets me
dealing with
go.
these
I
four
punch out.
broad
I walk
categories,
out the
and a
back door, get
long
my
line of
bicycle,
Supreme
and
Court
as I'm
cases
leaving
has
the
created
back
a
of the building, there
complicated
sits
and
my
nuanced
dad
set of
and
rules
another
governing
guy, and my
driverless
dad
vehicle
says, "Yeah,
searches. For example, in the
I
1996
thought
case
so."
of Pennsylvania versus LeBron,
I
the
said,
court
"What?"
held that, quote,
I said,
if the
"Dude, you're
car
giving
is
me
read at
24
will
hours
and
to come up
probable
with
cause
something I have
exists to
nothing,
believe
I have
it
no
contains
knowledge
contraband,
about,
the Fourth
and
Amendment
and
thus
and
permits
and you don't
police
want me to
officers to
start
carry a
now?
lot more. In
When do you
addition
want
to
me to start
allowing
looking for
officers
this
to search
shit?
the vehicle, the motor vehicle
Tomorrow?
exception
When
permits
you're going to
officers
lock
to
me up?"
search containers inside the vehicle.
He said,
In
"You
the
got
glove
24
compartment
hours.
in
If you
some
can do the crime, you can do
situations,
the
as the court
time."
explained in the 1979 case of Arkansas
Well,
versus
needless to say,
Sanders, where it held that a warrant generally is
I'm lost. I
required
didn't know
where
what to do.
personal luggage found in the vehicle can be
So,
searched. Quote,
this
not
is
all
where
containers
sometimes, I
and
don't know, you
packages
just think
found by
out of the
police during the
box.
course of a
But
search will
either way,
deserve the full
I
protection
rode
of
my
the Fourth
bicycle
Amendment.
back
Some
to
containers, by their very
where the
nature, cannot support
elementary
any
school
reasonable
was that
expectation
I
of
grew up
privacy
in.
because their contents can be
And
inferred from their outward appearance.
I
Similarly,
started
in
asking
some cases, the
questions
contents of a package will
of
be open
people
to
that I
public
knew,
view,
kids I
thereby
grew up with,
obviating the need for
And like I
reports.
said, I
The
was
court also
17, so
acknowledged,
most of them
quote,
was
there
my
will be
age.
difficulties in
And
determining which parts
and
were
just
taken
by
from an
talking to a couple
automobile
of
where a
girls,
warrant
all
for their
right, they
search had
start
been
telling me,
conducted, and
"Hey,
deciding whether a
this
container
dude
found in a
James and
vehicle
his
can be
other buddy,"
searched is
which
a
the other guy I
highly
think was an Indian,
fact-specific analysis.
from
Given
Indian
the strict
descent, all
legality
right,
of
like
Officer Pompey's assignment of
Pakistan or
search
somewhere
of
like
this
that. But
disorderly's vehicle radar
and James was a
system,
white
for
boy.
now, it's important to note that there are some
They had been
situations where an officer
just got
may
out of jail
search
like
a
a week or
vehicle
so
or its
before from
contents
breaking into
without
houses and
consent or a
stealing
warrant.
stuff. All right, now I found this all out in a matter of, I don't know, 2 hours after I left work. And the crazy thing is, the girls that I was talking to actually live right across the street from where this boy James lived. So I grew up with James. We got in trouble in school together. We played together. We rode horses together. We did everything together. So I knew the boy. So I go over there, and there sits James and this other fella. You have to forgive me, I can't remember his name because it was an Indian name, and I can't pronounce it. So I don't want to be rude and not say it properly. But either way, they knew I could kick their ass because I was a pretty good sized boy then, and I wasn't afraid to fight. So I let them know, if y'all did this, I'm telling you now, I'm not going to go to prison for you. You're going to take them guns back to my dad's, and you're going to give them back to him. I don't care how you do it, but you do it before 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Now, they didn't admit to me that they had them. But the next day, I'm going to say, I don't know, a couple hours before they actually came and arrested me, James called me and said, "Your dad's guns are in the woods about 100 yards from his house on an old trail that you kids used to play on when we rode horses." So immediately I tried getting hold of my dad. Bam, 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 I try. Nothing. So I went to work. I didn't think no more about it, right? Because when I did see him, I was just going to tell him, "Hey, Dad, don't ask me how I did it, but your guns are next to the house in the woods where we played, next to where that old fort was, actually, because I built an old fort when I was a kid." And but anyway, I'm washing dishes when the next thing I know, I got two Winter Park police officers standing on beside me and put me in handcuffs and take me to jail for theft of guns, running guns. And now here's one that I didn't even expect. I was paid some money to drive a car to a certain place and drop it off. No questions asked. Hell, at the time that I did it, I was only 16. I never thought nothing about it.
In this situation,
But
it appears that Officer Opedisano's
apparently,
warrantless search of
in
Mr.
the trunk of
Discerni's
that
vehicle
car
was predicated on the
was
notion of officer
enough
safety,
guns
which would
to, I guess,
implicate the
start your own little
protective
war, I guess, if
search
you wanted
arm
to,
of the Fourth
right?
Amendment's automobile
I didn't
exception.
know.
And the court
Nobody told
generally
me what
grant
was in
police
the
officers
car.
broad
Just wanted me to
leeway to
drop this
search
car off.
vehicles in
The deal was, a
situations where
dude
they
bought it, and
believe they
they
may
couldn't
be in
deliver it because
danger,
they
regardless
had
of whether
something
there
else
is
to do.
reasonable
Asked me if
suspicion
I
to
would,
suspect
and
the
told me they
individual
would
of a
pay me. I
crime.
said,
In the
hell yeah, I'll do
1983
it.
case of Michigan
And the
versus
next thing you
Long, the
know,
Supreme Court noted that,
uh,
quote, our
I'm
past
facing
cases indicate
100
that
years
protection of
in the
police and
penitentiary.
others can
Not
justify
5 years,
protective
not
searches
10
when
years,
police have a
100
reasonable belief
years in
that
the
the suspect poses a
penitentiary.
danger,
And
that roadside
I'm
encounters
fixing
between
to turn
police and
17
suspects
years
are
old
especially
when I
hazardous,
was
and that
going to
danger
trial. I
may
was still
arise from the
16.
possible presence of weapons in the area surrounding a
My only
suspect.
defense
Based on these
is
principles, the court
yes, I
concluded
did
that,
go to my
quote, a
dad's
search of
house
the
that day,
passenger compartment of an
and I walked
automobile,
around his
limited to
house,
those areas
but
in
I
which a
did
weapon
not
may be
steal his
placed or
guns.
hidden, is permissible if the police
They
officer
found me
possesses a
guilty.
reasonable
You know how they
belief
found
based
me
on
guilty?
specific and
Them
articulable
two boys that
facts,
stole them,
which, taken together with the rational
they
inferences from those
testified
facts,
against me
reasonably warrant the officer in believing that the
because
suspect
I
is
went to them
dangerous
and
and the
made
suspect
them give
may
them
gain
guns back.
immediate control of weapons. Applying this standard,
And nobody
lower
would believe
courts have
me.
often
I didn't
upheld
have
protective
one
searches of
witness to prove
vehicles
my
based on the
innocence.
driver
Not
making so-called
one.
furtive movements,
So
such
that
as
just goes
bending
to show
over
you
when
that that's
pulled
how
over,
easy your
as
life
such
can be
movements
ruined
could be
over
consistent
just
with
what
hiding a
somebody
weapon. For
says or
instance, in the
thinks without
2019
doing
case
any
of United
checking
States versus
first.
Mercado, the Seventh Circuit, which includes
But
Illinois,
anyway,
upheld a
make a long
protective
story
search of a
short,
vehicle based
while
on
I was in
furtive
court,
movements,
because I was only
including bending
16,
forward at the waist and reaching toward
instead
the
of trying me
passenger
as
and
an
rear
adult
seats, that,
and giving
quote,
me that
reasonably
100 years,
suggested that he
which
could
they
be
wanted to
reaching
give it
for
to
or
me, I
concealing
was
a
scared to
weapon.
death.
Based on Officer Gregory's
They
statement that he
gave me
saw Mr.
5 years.
disorderly reaching over to the
And
passenger
the
side
reason
of the
I had
vehicle,
100 years
it is
was
likely the
because
court
for
would find Officer
every gun
Opedisano's
in the
search
trunk of that
reasonable,
car
given that she only searched the
carried a
immediate
penalty of
area in
5 to 10 years.
question and did not search the entire vehicle.
And they was a shitload of guns. Don't know how many, but a bunch. When they opened the trunk, it was like all guns. These two boys had been stealing out of people's homes. And that's what they were doing. They were selling them to, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that part, but I'm gonna guess. Okay, I'm older now, so I can kind of put two and two together. You know, they were selling these stolen guns to gangs or motorcycle gangs or whoever that was on the wrong side of the law. That's what they were doing with them. And because I didn't have no money, I lived like I told you. I lived on the streets. I didn't have nothing, nobody. I made that choice for myself though, because of my situation at my home when I was 12 years old. What my dad did to me is, in today's society, would be totally unforgivable. They would have put my father in prison for the next 30 years. But thank God they didn't have that kind of punishment back then. And I'm still here, and my dad did not beat me to death. But he beat me pretty damn good, and I'm not going to lie about it. I don't know if you've ever been whooped with a horse crop, but if a grown man grabs a
The
horse
officers
crop
tell
that
Mr.
you use on a
Disorderly that he has
racehorse
already
and he
admitted
takes
to
it to
leaving.
an 11-year-old
Body
little
cam footage
boy,
clearly shows Mr.
I'm telling
Disorderly
you, it
telling the
does severe
officers that he
damage.
leaned over to get his phone.
And that's what my father did to me. And I ain't lying about it.
Under
It
the
happened.
so-called exclusionary
Then he
rule
shaved my
established by the
head
Supreme Court in the
and
1961
made
case
me
of
go to
Mack
school
versus
the next
Ohio,
day.
quote, all
That's
evidence
where he
obtained by
fucked up.
searches and seizures in
That's where
violation of the Constitution is
it came out
inadmissible
that
in a
what my
state
dad
court.
did to
An
me.
earlier
But to show
Supreme
you
Court
the kind of
decision
kid
applied
I
the same
was,
rule to federal courts.
when I
This
got to
means
school,
that
the
any
first
evidence is discovered during an
class we
unlawful
had was
search of a
PE.
vehicle, a criminal
And for
defendant can
you
file a
millenniums that
so-called
don't know what
motion
that
to
is, we went
suppress,
outside and
and if the court
played.
agrees that the search
We were
was
allowed to
illegal,
do
the
that for
prosecution
an hour.
cannot
We went
use
out
any
and
of the
just
evidence obtained
run
from the
all of our
search to
energy out
prove
so
that
that
the
we could
defendant
sit
is
in
guilty of the
class
crime.
and
Here, the
study
fact
and
that
actually
Mr.
learn something,
Disorderly admitted on
instead of
video
being
that
all
he leaned
fidgety and
over could have
jumpity and wanting to
affected
get
his
out. You know what I
ability to
mean?
suppress any
That's
hypothetical
how it
evidence
was back
found
then.
during a search of his vehicle. If Mr.
But
Disorderly had been arrested based upon something found in the search and requested
I,
that the
I, I
evidence
had
be
nothing.
suppressed, the
My
prosecution could
dad
use
gave
his
me a
admission to
choice.
bending over as evidence that the
When it
officers
was all
had
said
a
and done, the
reasonable belief that
police
he
actually
was
gave me
dangerous
back
and
to my
might gain
father.
immediate control of weapons. Absent
Now, my
Mr.
dad didn't take
Disorderly's
me home and
admission,
beat
it
me
is likely
again, but
that
he
the
did take me
only
home and
evidence
sit
that
me
Mr.
down in the living
Disorderly
room, and
bent
this is what he
over in his
said to me.
vehicle would be the
He said,
officer's
son,
testimony, which could
if
potentially
you're
be
going to live in my
discredited during a
house,
suppression hearing. Of
you're going
course,
to do
we
as
have
I
Mr.
say,
Disorderly's movements
when
were
I
the
say,
only reason the
and
officers
without
cite for their
question.
suspicion, there is still a legal argument to be made
And
that
if
the search was
you don't want to do
but
that,
Mr.
he says
Disorderly's
you can
case
go
would
in
be
your bedroom,
stronger if he could also
pack
challenge
whatever
the
you can put in a
factual basis
suitcase.
for the search.
He
This
says you
is
can
a
walk out that
perfect
front door over
example
there,
why
and he
criminal defense
says
attorneys generally advise
nobody's going
citizens
to
to
stop you.
not talk to the police. And it is important to
Now,
bear
I'm
in mind
telling
that
you,
anything said during
my
a police
dad beat the
interaction
shit
can
out of me with a
impact
horse crop.
subsequent legal
I won't go into
proceedings. In this
details of what it did
situation,
to me,
Mr.
but
Disorderly
you can
certainly could
imagine
have
what
benefited from
it would
invoking his right to
do a grown
silence, as
man
he
hitting
essentially
an
would be
11-year-old
unable to
little boy
challenge the officer's
with a horse
assertions that
crop
he bent
against
over the
flesh.
vehicle because he admitted to
It
doing
ain't
so on
pretty.
camera.
When you see grown men cry from looking at you, you know something's bad wrong with you. But to show you how I was now, this is no bullshit. I literally lied to these people about what had happened to me. I didn't tell them my daddy took me and locked me in a shed and beat the hell out of me with a horse crop. I didn't tell them that. I told them we were stringing barbed wire up, and if anybody knows anything about stringing barbed wire up, if you stretch it too tight, that shit snaps. You can't get away from it. It'll ball you up so quick, all you can do is pray you ain't got much out there. But that's what I told them happened to me. And they didn't buy it. But I did tell them that. But they didn't buy it. But either way, they gave me back to my dad in a couple of days later. And that was the choice my dad gave me. Walk out that door. Nobody stops you. He said the only catch to that is you never come back.
The court hearing, but the officers did not show up to court, and the ticket was dismissed.
Okay. So I looked right at him and I said, you mean if I go in there and pack my clothes and I walk out that front door, you're not going to stop me? He said, no. But he says, you got to remember, if you go out that door, you don't come back. I said, all right then.
The Chicago Police Department officers
You know how long it took me to think about it? I don't guess I did, because I went straight to my room, took my pillow out of my pillowcase, I loaded it down with anything I could put in it, that from blue jeans to socks to underwears to shirts, and an extra pair of tennis shoes, I think, because I loved cowboy boots, and that's what I wore 90% of the time. Fortunately, what few years I got to spend with my father after getting out of the orphanage home, we had horses. I was a cowboy. Straight up, cowboy hat, denim jeans, the whole 9 yards. I didn't go nowhere I wasn't a cowboy. So, when I walked out that door, there was a racetrack, I don't know, a mile up the road, mile and a half up the road from where we lived. And this is in Castleberry, Florida. You can look this up, Google it, whatever you want to do. This is a true story. I lived at 2020 Lake Drive, and the racetrack was about, like I said, mile and a half, might have been 2 miles up the road from us. I could ride a bicycle there in about 10 minutes, so it wasn't far. But during racing season, they would have trotters and pacers, depending on the season, thoroughbreds, right? So I went straight to that racetrack, and that night I slept in a tack room. And the next morning, walking out of that tack room down one of the barns, a man offered me a job mucking stalls for $165 a week. Now, I'm about 12 now. I mean, I've done had a birthday since this has gone on. I'm 12 years old, and you're going to give me $165 a week to shovel shit? I'm in. And I did that for, shit, I don't know, 2-3 years. Hell, I could harness horses, take them out for training, whatever. I mean, it's just natural to me. I mean, and I feel like, had I been born a cowboy, my life would have been a lot easier. But instead, I had to be born in a time when, we have all this turmoil going on in this country. I love what Martin Luther King did. I think the man showed what a man is. No different than any other man. And to me, that was a gift. And you know what? Our government killed that man. He wasn't killed by somebody that hated black people. He was killed by our government, because our government didn't want to stop racism. Our government didn't want to stop that shit. And people need to open their eyes and see what's going on at the top. I mean, these old senators that's been in there 50 years, you know why they're in there 50 years? Because they're so corrupt they can be bought. Go look at their donations from people. You'll see that the crookedest billionaires out there are the ones that donate money to them. And you wonder what's wrong with America? You want to get rid of racism? Get rid of these old bastards. Let's put some good, honest people in there like Jim Jordan or Matt Gaetz. And I'm sure don't everybody like them, but hey, they tell it like it is and they speak the truth. They're not like Adam Schiff or Jerry Nadler, where they can get right up there and be the chairman and lie like dogs and not be held accountable for that shit. If it was one of us, oh my God, they'd spit beans through a straw to feed us. As an American, as a free American, I want somebody to explain to me what the hell is going on in our country. And as far as Trump goes, I'd vote for that son bitch again in a heartbeat. All because, listen, I don't know if you know it or not, but other countries didn't muck with us because they was afraid of the man. You think they're afraid of Joe Biden? Ah, shit. No. Anyway, thanks for letting me jaw. Sorry if I hurt anybody's feelings. I didn't intend to, because like I told you, first time video I had out there, opinions are like assholes. We all got one, and that's my opinion. Again, thank you for letting me pull on you in a minute. Bye.